Hello everybody and welcome to part 2 of this lesson on simple, compound and complex sentences. In part 1 I asked you to work through the 3 exercises that I gave at the end of the lesson, and this first one asked you to figure out which type of sentence each one of these sentences was. So if you take a look, I've marked in blue down the side what type of sentence they are, and I'm just going to quickly go through and explain why they are that type. So this first one here, Andrew walked to the train station. It is a simple sentence. It tells us one thing and it has a subject, Andrew, and it has a verb, the fact that he walked to the train station. Okay, this second one is a complex sentence, and that's because it actually has a sandwiched subordinate clause right in the middle. And if we took that subordinate clause out, it would still read perfectly. The doctor was called into A&E, but we've added some extra information about the doctor by saying who had only just arrived at work. So that is why it is a complex sentence. This one here is a compound sentence. Leah knew she had done wrong but refused to put it right. So we've got 2 independent clauses there joined with a coordinating conjunction, which is but. This one here is also a compound sentence. Bradley sat at the back of the room and read his book. Again, 2 independent clauses joined with a coordinating conjunction, the word and there. This sentence here, although Karen was on a diet, she still decided to eat some chocolate. This is a complex sentence because it has a subordinating conjunction at the beginning, and this is a subordinate clause here at the beginning, although Karen was on a diet. And because that subordinate clause comes at the beginning of the sentence, we need a comma at the end of that clause to hold that sentence together. Okay, this sentence here is also a complex sentence. Devastated at the result, the footy fans trundled back home. So you've got your main clause at the end, the footy fans trundled back home, and you've added some extra information in the form of a subordinate clause at the beginning, devastated at the result. And again, a comma because your subordinate clause comes at the beginning. And this final one here is a simple sentence. Nobody could prepare them for the excitement. So that tells us just one thing, no extra information added. That is a simple sentence. Okay, so the second exercise I gave you was to replace the commas that I had deleted out of these sentences. So as you can see, there's a comma here for this complex sentence. These are all complex sentences here. This comma comes because the subordinate clause is at the beginning of the sentence. She returned the computer after she noticed it was damaged. Okay, so instead of a comma, we have this subordinating conjunction in the middle of the sentence. When the cost goes up, customers buy less clothing. So this is your subordinate clause at the beginning here. As she was bright and ambitious, comma, she became manager in no time. So again, our subordinate clause comes at the beginning of that sentence. Wherever you go, you can always find beauty, and the comma comes here. Your subordinate clause at the beginning of the sentence again. The actor was happy he got a part in a movie, although the part was a small one. So there we've got our subordinate clause at the end, and therefore we don't need a comma here because we've got our subordinating conjunction in the middle of the sentence. The professional who had been thoroughly trained was at a loss to explain. So here we've got the sandwich technique complex sentence with our subordinate clause in the middle of the sentence, and therefore we need 2 commas. And finally, we have as genes change over time, evolution progresses. So our subordinate clause is at the beginning with the comma at the end of that subordinate clause, acting like a glue holding the sentence together. And finally, I asked you to take these really boring, simple sentences and I asked you to use your knowledge of complex sentences, try and write a complex sentence for each one of those sentences. Now you could shift those sentences completely, you could just use them as a basis or an idea for a complex sentence, or you could just add a subordinate clause in. So what I've done is I have written my own complex sentences for these sentences in front of you right now. So let's have a look at those. Okay, so I've got Miss W stared at the student, even though she knew they weren't paying any attention to her whatsoever. So in that one, I've added the conjunction, the subordinating conjunction, in the middle. Okay, so I don't require a comma here. I've added a subordinate clause at the end of the sentence. Despite hours of training, I knew I was going to be last. So here, I've added my subordinate clause at the beginning of the sentence. Okay, my subordinating conjunction comes here, and therefore I need a comma at the end of my subordinate clause. Above the powdery clouds, the birds screeched as they hastily flew away from the approaching storm. So here I've added a prepositional phrase here to say where the birds are, and I've also added a conjunction just here and a subordinate clause at the end. Excuse me. The next one says the train, which was destined for the bright lights of New York City, trundled along the track. So I've used the sandwich technique there, and I've sandwiched a subordinate clause right in the middle, and I've explained where that train was going to, so some extra information about the train itself. This one here, I've said frustrated and lonely, Jason sat in the corner by himself. So I've used two adjectives to describe Jason, and I've put my subordinate clause at the beginning, and therefore it requires a comma after it. And finally, I've said, like a raging ball of fire, the sun rose in the thunderous sky. So I've used a simile at the beginning as a subordinate clause to describe the sun itself. So I'm sure that you're going to have very different complex sentences, but what I wanted to do was give you an idea of how you can move your subordinate clauses around within the sentence, so you can have them at the beginning, the middle and the end, and all of those different ways of writing a complex sentence. So you can see that even within those 6 sentences there, I've used different techniques to produce a complex sentence. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe to my channel for further videos on writing and reading skills. Follow me on Twitter at aceyourexams, and head over to my website aceyourexams.wordpress.com for loads of useful free downloads.